Hello, my name is Zach Gibbs, and I'm a content developer within education services inside Juniper Networks. And today we will be going through the Verifying MAC VRF Layer 2 Isolated Tenants Learning Byte. All right, so here is our topology. We have 4 switches, spine 1, spine 2, leaf 1, and leaf 2. However, similar to the Configuring MAC VRF Layer 2 Isolated Tenants Learning Byte, we are just going to be focusing on the leaf 1 switch here. And so with leaf 1, we have currently 2 MAC VRFs configured. We have V10 that is configured for host 1, and that has XE004 in it. And then we have V20, which is configured for host 3, and that has XE003 in it. And just for a quick recap, host 1 is going to be using VLAN V10. IP address 10.1.1.1, VNI 5010. And then host 3 is using VLAN V20, IP address 10.1.2.3, and VNI 5020. And then we have a type 5 VRF that you can see here. And that has the IRB interfaces, IRB10 and IRB20. And you can see their virtual gateway addresses, the 10.1.1.254 and 10.1.2.254. And something else I do want to point out is the loopback addresses. For spine 1, we have 192.168.100.1. Spine 2 is .2. Leaf 1 is .11, and leaf 2 is .12. And we'll be primarily focusing on spine 1's loopback IP address and leaf 1's loopback address. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and jump to the CLI and get this going. All right, so here is the CLI for leaf 1. And so recall that we're not connecting to another type 5 routing instance with this learning byte. There'll be another learning byte where I will go through the configuration of that, and then also the verification probably in a different learning byte as well. So keep a lookout for that. But right now we're just focusing on what's happening on leaf 1. And so what we can do here is if we look at run show Bgp Summary, we can see our BGP sessions, our BGP neighbors. And you can see here that we are connected to spine 1 and also spine 2. And we're not passing any routes, or rather we're not receiving any routes, and that's because we haven't connected it to another type 5 instance. And so, or the leaf 2 that is, once we connect it to leaf 2, we would see some things happening there. And so that's fine. That's not a big deal. And so, but we can look at, if we do run show route advertising protocol BGP and specify the loopback address of spine 1, we can take a quick look at what we're sending. And this is important because you can see the BGP Evpn table. You can see that here. You can see some of the routes we're sending. And we have some type 2s and type 3s. We can see it's coming from the loopback address of leaf 1, which is the switch we're on. This is the route distinguisher here. So you can see it's 11:10. And then you can see the VNI of 5010. And then you can see the MAC address that we're sending along. And so that's great. We have other type 2s and type 3s, and you see a type 2 for the, you see the route distinguisher of 11:20, VNI of 5020, and then loopback address. And so that's great. That's what we want to see there. And then the important thing we see here is we have these type 5s that we're sending. Recall that in the configuration learning byte that we configured the export policy to send 2 type 5 routes. And you can see here that it's coming from, it's using the route distinguisher that is based off the loopback address of leaf 1. And then it's got the :5. And so that's what we used in the configuration learning byte to represent the route distinguisher of the T5 routing instance. And the VNI is set to 0. That's perfect. That's what we want to see for that since this is a type 5 route. And you can see the IP address that we're sending and the subnet. And you can see that this represents the IRB.10 subnet, so that is the subnet that host 1 is a part of, and this is IRB.2, or 20, that is, IRB.20, and that would be host 3. And so then we can scroll down further, and we get some similar information. You can see this broken out into the different routing instances, and you see the T5 routing instance, we have those 2 type 5 routes that we discussed earlier, and then in the V10 routing instance, we have the routes that are associated with VNI 5010. And then V20, we have the routes associated with VNI 5020. And so that looks good. That's what we should be seeing there. And then we can also do run show MAC VRF forwarding interface and look at the individual interfaces. And you can see here that we have the routing instance is V20. So XE003 is a part of V20. And you can see that XE003 here. See the VLAN name, V20. And then the tag is 20, so VLAN ID 20. Forwarding state, it's untagged, so it's an access interface. We do the same thing for XE004. You see it's a part of V10 for the routing instance. And then we have the interface name, the VLAN ID, the forwarding state, and untagged, which lets us know it is an access interface. And then we can do the run show MAC VRF forwarding MAC IP table and specify the instance. We'll say V10 here. And you can see all we have in here is just the IRB interface, and that's expected because we haven't actually sent any traffic yet. So if we do the same thing with V20, you can see we actually have another one that's out the XE003 interface. That is host 1, and then the IRB as well. So let's actually go ahead and send some traffic and see if we can get some routes being passed around. And so we'll let that run for just a little bit. We'll go back and check. And so let's jump back to leaf 1. So this is host 1. I forgot to mention that. So host 1 is pinging host 3 now. So let's jump back to leaf 1 and look at that for V10. And there we go. So dot 1 is showing up with the XE004 interface for the routing instance V10. And so you can see the MAC address as well. And so things look good there. That's what we should see. And the next command that we can run is the run show Evpn database. We could specify the instance, but don't need to since we only have 2 instances. And you can see here, see the source MAC, the active interface. So we know this is host 1. And then the source MAC, or source MAC in the V20 routing instance. This was for the V10 routing instance. And the actual interface, that's host 3. You can also see the IP address associated with that. And we can verify that as well. And then there is one last command I would like to run. It is the run show Evpn instance extensive, and we'll say V10. And it has a lot of good information in here. First of all, we can tell, okay, yeah, that's definitely the instance. We see the route distinguisher for that instance. We can see the encapsulation type, MAC advertisements, MAC database type stuff. And then we can see the interfaces that are associated with it and the ESI involved there. And then we can see now this is interesting here. I like this. IRB interfaces, number of IRB interfaces. Shows one is up, shows the name of the IRB interface, shows the VNI, status, and then the L3 context. Recall that we put the IRB interface, the IRB10 interface here, in the T5 routing instance. And so that is important that shows up there, that this L3 context is in T5 or your T5 routing instance. Here we call it T5. And then we have some other information, bridge domain information, such as the VLAN, the VNI, IRB, and let's see what else here. We have the ESI, Ethernet segment value. We can see that IRB is up and forwarding. We see the router ID here and the VTEP source IP address. And we can run that command for V20 as well. And you can see here in V20, we have similar information. We have the instance name, route distinguisher. I won't go through everything that I went through beforehand because it's all kind of the same, just with some differences. I do really like this output. This is very important to verify where the IRB interface is and where that L3 context is. Because recall that with the VLAN, we referenced it as the VLAN interface for the VLAN, the L3 interface for the VLAN, and then we put the interface in the T5 routing instance. So that's very important. So that does bring us to the end of this Learning Byte. In this Learning Byte, we demonstrated how to verify Layer 2 isolated tenants with MAC VRF in a data center. So as always, thanks for watching.
Visit the Juniper Education Services website to learn more about courses. View our full range of classroom, online, and e-learning courses. Learning paths, industry segment and technology-specific training paths. Juniper Network's certification program, the ultimate demonstration of your competence. And the training community, from forums to social media. Join the discussion.